I stood at my living room window watching 6 pickup trucks roll up my private driveway in Montana. And my first thought was that someone had gotten seriously lost trying to find the ski resort 30 miles south. My name is Marcus Quinn, and I own 400 acres of pristine wilderness property about an hour outside of Bozeman. I bought this land 7 years ago when I sold my tech startup in San Francisco for more money than I knew what to do with. The property included a main house where I lived, a guest cabin, and miles of untouched forest that turned into a winter wonderland every year from November through March. I loved the isolation. I loved the quiet. That was the whole point of moving here. The trucks parked in a neat line near my front gate, and a woman in her mid-40s climbed out of the lead vehicle. She wore a puffy pink jacket, designer sunglasses that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and had that particular haircut that seemed to be mandatory for a certain type of suburban woman. You know the one. Short, angled, with blonde highlights that screamed, "I need to speak to your manager." I grabbed my coat and headed outside, my boots crunching through the February snow. The temperature was hovering around 15 degrees and my breath came out in white clouds. "Can I help you?" I called out as I approached. The woman turned and smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made my skin crawl. Too wide, too practiced. "Oh, wonderful. You must be Marcus Quinn. I'm Patricia Fairmont, president of the Pine Valley Homeowners Association." She extended a gloved hand. I shook it confused. "I'm sorry, what homeowners association? I'm not part of any HOA. This is private property." Patricia's smile never wavered. "Well, that's actually what we need to discuss. You see, there's been a wonderful development. The county rezoned this entire area 3 months ago as part of the new Pine Valley Community Initiative. Your property now falls under our jurisdiction." "That's impossible," I said flatly. "I bought this land specifically because it was unincorporated. No HOA, no restrictions. Just me and the wilderness." "Oh, I completely understand your confusion," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But I have all the paperwork right here in my truck. The county commissioners voted on it last September. It was in the local paper and everything. You should have received notification by mail." I hadn't received anything, but then again my mailbox was at the end of a 3-mile driveway, and I only checked it once a week at most, sometimes less in winter. "Let me see this paperwork," I demanded. Patricia produced a folder thick with documents. I flipped through them, my jaw tightening with each page. It looked legitimate. County seals, signatures, legal jargon that would take a lawyer to fully decode. But the gist was clear. My property was now part of something called the Pine Valley Planned Community, subject to HOA rules, regulations, and fees. "This is insane," I said. "You can't just force someone into an HOA without their consent." "Actually, when the county rezones an area for community development, existing property owners are automatically included," Patricia explained, still smiling. "It's all perfectly legal. Now, the reason I'm here today is regarding your land usage." "My land usage?" "Yes. You see, the HOA has been reviewing all properties in our community, and we noticed that you're not utilizing this beautiful acreage to its full potential. 400 acres and just one house. It's terribly wasteful. So the board voted, and we've decided to develop the northern section of your property." I stared at her. "You've decided what?" "We're building a winter cabin retreat," she said proudly. 71 heated cabins, to be exact. Each one will be beautifully appointed, eco-friendly, and perfect for winter tourism. Bozeman is growing, and there's tremendous demand for vacation rentals. The project will benefit the entire community." "Get off my property," I said quietly. Now, Marcus, I understand change can be difficult, but get off my property right now, or I'm calling the sheriff. Patricia's smile finally faltered. I really don't think you want to do that. As I explained, we have full legal authority here. The construction begins next week. You'll receive your share of the HOA fees, of course. $2,500 per month for community maintenance and improvements. You want me to pay you $2,500 a month? Well, yes. All property owners pay HOA fees. It's standard. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer, a guy named James who'd handled my property purchase and business affairs for years. Patricia and her entourage stood there awkwardly while I explained the situation. James told me not to agree to anything and that he'd look into it immediately. My lawyer is investigating this, I told Patricia after hanging up. Until I hear from him, nobody is building anything on my land. Now leave. Patricia's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, Mr. Quinn. The HOA doesn't take kindly to uncooperative homeowners. We have bylaws and we have enforcement mechanisms. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. Good day. She and her convoy left, and I stood in my driveway for a long time, watching their tail lights disappear down the mountain road. James called me back 3 hours later with bad news. The rezoning was real. The county had indeed created this Pine Valley community designation, and my property was included in it. Technically, the HOA did have certain rights regarding community development, though the scope of those rights was debatable. He recommended I attend the next county commissioners' meeting to fight it, but that wouldn't be for another 2 weeks. In the meantime, he'd file an injunction to prevent any construction. The injunction never happened. I woke up 4 days later to the sound of heavy machinery. I threw on clothes and raced outside to find bulldozers, excavators, and at least 20 construction workers clearing trees on the northern section of my property, about half a mile from my house. I drove my truck up there, parked it right in front of a bulldozer, and got out screaming. The foreman, a tired-looking guy in his 50s, showed me a construction permit issued by the county and an authorization letter from the Pine Valley HOA board. Look, buddy, I just work here, he said. You got a problem, take it up with whoever hired us. I called the sheriff's office. Deputy Williams, who I'd met a few times at the local diner, showed up an hour later. He reviewed all the paperwork, then gave me a sympathetic shrug. Mr. Quinn, as far as I can tell, they've got permission to be here. I know it seems wrong, but this is a civil matter. You need to handle it through the courts. They're building on my land without my permission. According to this, the HOA has development rights as part of the community bylaws. Like I said, civil matter. I can't arrest anyone for this. I called James again. He was livid but confirmed that legally, my hands were tied until we could get before a judge. The earliest court date he could arrange was 6 weeks out. 6 weeks. In that time, the HOA could build whatever they wanted, and they did. Over the next month, I watched in disbelief as 71 identical log cabins sprouted across my northern property like mushrooms after rain. They were nice cabins too, which somehow made it worse. Each one was about 800 square feet, with full electricity, plumbing, heating, and modern appliances. They built gravel roads connecting them all, installed streetlights, and even put up a fancy wooden sign that read Pine Valley Luxury Cabins. Patricia visited 3 more times during construction. Each time, she was cheerful and condescending, explaining how the cabin rentals would increase property values for everyone in the community. Each time, I told her we'd see her in court. Each time, she just smiled and reminded me that my HOA fees were now 60 days overdue. The cabins were finished in early April, just as the last snow was melting. That's when Patricia showed up with a professional photographer and a marketing team. They took pictures of the cabins with the mountains in the background, created a website, and listed all 71 units on Airbnb, VRBO, and Booking.com. The rates were astronomical, $300 per night minimum, with higher prices during peak season. My court date finally arrived in mid-April. James had prepared a comprehensive case arguing that the HOA had overstepped its authority, that the rezoning had been improperly noticed, and that my property rights had been violated. We walked into the Gallatin County Courthouse confident we'd win. Judge Morrison listened to both sides for 3 hours. The HOA's lawyer, a slick guy from a big Bozeman firm, presented binders full of documentation showing that everything they'd done was technically legal under Montana's community development statutes. He argued that the cabins enhanced the property value and served the public good by providing tourist accommodations. Judge Morrison ruled in favor of the HOA. I sat there stunned as he explained that while he found the situation unusual, the HOA had followed all legal procedures. The rezoning was valid. The development rights were valid. The construction permits were valid. He suggested I should have been more vigilant about checking my mail and attending county meetings where the rezoning was discussed. However, Judge Morrison added, the court does have concerns about the rental revenue. Mr. Quinn, as the legal property owner, may have claims to income generated from his land. That will require a separate proceeding to determine the proper revenue distribution. It was a small victory in a crushing defeat. The cabins were legal and staying put, but at least I might get some of the rental income. Walking out of that courthouse, James turned to me and said, "We appeal this. The judge's interpretation of the community development statute is questionable. This could go to the state Supreme Court if necessary." "How much will that cost?" "A lot. But you're in the right here, Marcus." I thought about it for a long moment, standing on the courthouse steps in the spring sunshine. Then I had a different idea. What if we don't appeal the construction? I said slowly, "What if instead we focus on the revenue?" "What do you mean?" The judge said I might have claims to rental income. "Let's pursue that angle hard. If they want to run a vacation rental business on my land, fine. But I want every single dollar they make from it." James's eyes widened. "That's actually brilliant. You wouldn't be fighting the construction itself, which would be an uphill battle. You'd be fighting for your property rights to income generation. That's a much stronger legal position." We filed new paperwork that same week. The argument was simple. Regardless of HOA development rights, I remained the underlying property owner. Any income generated from my land should flow to me, not to an HOA that I never voluntarily joined. It was basic property law. The HOA fought it viciously. Patricia showed up at my house twice, furious now, all pretense of friendliness gone. She threatened me with liens, foreclosure, and every legal action she could think of. I told her to talk to my lawyer and shut the door in her face. The rental revenue case moved faster than the original construction case. We got a court date in just 3 weeks, and this time, Judge Morrison seemed more interested. James presented case law from 6 different states, showing that property owners retained income rights, even when easements or development rights had been granted to other parties. The HOA's lawyer argued that the HOA had invested nearly $4 million into building the cabins, and they deserved to recoup their investment. Then they shouldn't have built on someone else's land without securing proper agreements, Judge Morrison said dryly. He ruled in my favor with certain conditions. All rental revenue from the cabins would go to me as the property owner. However, the HOA would be entitled to reimbursement for construction costs over time, taken as a deduction from the rental income. Once their construction costs were fully reimbursed, all future revenue would be mine free and clear. The judge appointed a neutral third-party property manager to handle the bookings and revenue distribution. Every dollar that came in would be documented. The HOA would get their construction costs back at a rate of 40% of gross revenue, and I'd receive the remaining 60%. Patricia nearly had a stroke right there in the courtroom. This is outrageous. We built those cabins to benefit the community. Then you should have purchased your own land, Judge Morrison replied. Decision is final. Next case. The property manager, a no-nonsense woman named Sandra who ran a vacation rental agency in Bozeman, took over all operations in May. She changed all the passwords, updated the bank accounts to route payments properly, and gave me weekly reports on bookings and revenue. The numbers were staggering. In May alone, the cabins brought in $112,000. $67,000 went to me. $45,000 went into the HOA's construction reimbursement account. June was even better. $148,000 total, with nearly $90,000 to me. July brought in over $200,000. The cabins were booked solid, mostly by wealthy tourists who wanted an upscale Montana experience without roughing it too much. By the end of summer, I'd personally made over $400,000 from cabins I never wanted, built by people I couldn't stand, on property they had no right to develop. Patricia stopped talking to me entirely, but she couldn't stop what was happening. Every month, Sandra sent out detailed financial reports showing exactly how much money was flowing in and how much the HOA's outstanding balance had decreased. At the current rate, it would take about 3 years for them to recoup their full construction costs. After that, I'd be collecting every single dollar the cabins generated. The winter season was predictably massive. Skiers and snowboarders packed the cabins from November through March, paying premium rates for the heated luxury accommodations. By the end of that first full year, I'd personally collected over $900,000 in rental revenue. The HOA had recovered about $600,000 of their $4 million construction cost, which meant I was looking at several more years of 60-40 splits before the cabins became entirely my revenue stream. But even at 60%, I was making more money than I'd ever made from my tech startup dividends. But the story doesn't end with me getting rich off their construction project. It ends with Patricia Fairmont making a critical mistake born from desperation and anger. In February of the second year, Sandra called me with concerning news. "Marcus, someone's been accessing the booking system and canceling reservations. Not all of them, just random ones here and there. Then those same dates are getting rebooked through a different platform, and the money isn't coming through our official accounts. Can you track where it's going?" I'm trying, but whoever's doing this knows what they are doing. They're using a backdoor in the software. I immediately suspected the HOA. James hired a forensic accountant and a digital investigator. Within a week, they'd traced the diverted funds to an account registered under something called Pine Valley Community Services, LLC. The LLC's registered agent was Patricia Fairmont. She'd been skimming money, not just a little bit either. Over the past 4 months, she'd diverted almost $70,000 away from the official accounts and into her personal LLC. "This is fraud," James said grimly. "Clear-cut embezzlement. We need to report this to the police." I met with Detective Sarah Chen from the Bozeman Police Department Financial Crimes Unit. She reviewed all our documentation, the bank records, the digital trail, and Patricia's connection to the LLC. Her expression grew more serious with each piece of evidence. "Mr. Quinn, I'm going to need to involve the county prosecutor. This isn't just civil fraud. This is criminal embezzlement and possibly wire fraud since she used electronic systems to divert the funds. If she's been doing this with HOA money as well, the charges could be extensive. The investigation expanded rapidly. Detective Chen discovered that Patricia had been running similar schemes with other HOA funds for years. She collected special assessments from homeowners for various community projects, then funneled portions into her personal accounts. She'd authorized payments to fake contractors who were really just shell companies she controlled. The Pine Valley HOA, which governed about 200 homes in addition to my property, had been her personal piggy bank for at least 5 years. The total amount she'd stolen exceeded $600,000. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning in March. I wasn't there, but Sandra called me right afterward to describe the scene. Detective Chen and 2 uniformed officers showed up at Patricia's house at 7 in the morning with a warrant. Patricia apparently screamed about persecution and illegal searches while they led her out in handcuffs. Her husband, a quiet accountant named Robert who seemed perpetually bewildered by his wife's antics, stood in the doorway looking shell-shocked. Patricia was charged with 15 counts including embezzlement, wire fraud, theft by deception, and abuse of fiduciary duty. Her bail was set at $200,000, which she made using her house as collateral. The trial was scheduled for June. The HOA fell apart almost immediately. Once homeowners learned their president had been stealing from them for years, they revolted. Emergency meetings were held. The entire board was dismissed. Several homeowners filed civil suits seeking reimbursement for the fake assessments they'd paid. The whole organization collapsed into chaos and recriminations. In the midst of this chaos, the newly appointed emergency HOA board reached out to me through James. They wanted to negotiate a settlement regarding the cabins. They acknowledged the whole situation had been handled badly from the start, and with Patricia's criminal activity now exposed, they wanted to make things right. We met at James's office in Bozeman on a rainy April afternoon. The new board president, a reasonable guy named Tom who owned a hardware store in town, laid out their proposal. "Mr. Quinn, first and foremost, we apologize. Patricia ran roughshod over everyone, including proper procedures and basic decency. The cabin development should never have happened the way it did. We've reviewed the situation with our attorneys, and frankly, we don't have a legal leg to stand on beyond what the judge already ruled. So, here's what we propose. We'll sign over complete ownership of the cabins to you. All 71 structures become legally yours. In exchange, we ask that you waive any claims to the construction reimbursement. Essentially, you'd be buying the cabins for the $600,000 we've already recovered, instead of the full $4 million they cost to build." I looked at James. He gave me a subtle nod. "What about the HOA designation on my property?" I asked. "And the fees Patricia tried to impose?" Tom grimaced. "We're actually in the process of dissolving the entire Pine Valley planned community designation. It turns out Patricia pushed that through the county commissioners, using falsified petitions and support documents. Most of the supposed community members listed on the rezoning application never actually agreed to it. The county is investigating, and they're likely to reverse the whole thing. Once that happens, your property will revert to its original unincorporated status. No HOA, no fees, no restrictions. So I'd own the cabins outright and my property would be free of any HOA involvement, correct? Look, we know we're getting the bad end of this deal financially. But the HOA is broke. We're facing multiple lawsuits, and honestly, most of us just want out. This would resolve one of our biggest problems and let everyone move on. I thought about it for exactly 10 seconds. Deal. Draft the papers. The agreement was finalized 3 weeks later. I became the sole owner of 71 luxury cabins on my property, free and clear. The county officially reversed the Pine Valley rezoning in May, citing irregularities in the approval process. My 400 acres returned to their original status, private, unincorporated, and completely under my control. Patricia's trial happened in June, just as the summer tourism season was ramping up. I attended most of it, watching from the gallery as prosecutors methodically presented evidence of her years-long theft scheme. Her defense attorney tried to argue that she'd been doing what she thought was best for the community, but the paper trail was damning. Bank records, forged documents, fake invoices, all of it pointing directly to her. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing in July, Judge Morrison gave her 6 years in federal prison and ordered full restitution to all victims, including the HOA and me. She'd have to sell her house and liquidate her assets to begin paying back what she'd stolen. Her husband filed for divorce 2 weeks after the sentencing. As for me, I settled into my new reality as the unlikely owner of a successful vacation rental business. Sandra stayed on as property manager, and we hired a small staff to handle maintenance and housekeeping. The cabins continued to book solid throughout the year, generating consistent revenue that now flowed entirely to me. The second summer season brought in over $1.4 million. After operating expenses and Sandra's management fees, I cleared about $900,000 in profit. Winter was even better. Apparently, my cabins had developed a reputation as the premier winter destination in the greater Bozeman area. Families, couples, ski groups, all of them willing to pay premium prices for heated luxury in the Montana wilderness. I used some of the money to upgrade my own house, adding a home office and a proper workshop. I donated a substantial amount to the local land conservancy to protect other wilderness areas from unwanted development. And I invested the rest, building a financial cushion that would last generations. The irony wasn't lost on me. Patricia Fairmont and her HOA had invaded my property, built structures I never wanted, and tried to force me into an organization I never agreed to join. Their arrogance and illegal actions had ended with their president in federal prison and their organization dissolved. And I'd ended up wealthier than I'd ever imagined, all from the very cabins they'd built to benefit themselves. Sometimes, late at night, I'd walk through my property, past the rows of illuminated cabins filled with happy vacationers, and think about how differently things could have gone. If I'd been less stubborn, I might have just accepted the HOA takeover and paid the fees. If I'd been more aggressive, I might have fought the construction harder and ended up with nothing but legal bills. Instead, I'd found the one path that turned their overreach into my advantage. I kept one cabin permanently empty, the one closest to my house. I converted it into a guest space for friends visiting from California. On clear nights, we'd sit on its porch, drinking whiskey and watching the stars, and inevitably someone would ask about the other 70 cabins scattered across my land. It's a long story, I'd always say. But the short version is that someone tried to take advantage of me, and it backfired spectacularly. The Pine Valley HOA was officially dissolved in September, its assets distributed among the creditors and victims of Patricia's theft. Tom and several other former board members personally apologized to me at the final dissolution meeting. I told them I held no grudge against them, only Patricia. They were victims too, in their own way. The county commissioners instituted new regulations about HOA formations and rezoning procedures, requiring direct consent from affected property owners and multiple public hearings. My case had become something of a local legend, a cautionary tale about HOA overreach and the importance of property rights. Local news covered the story extensively, and I gave one interview to a reporter from the Bozeman Daily Chronicle. The headline read, "Property owner prevails after HOA builds 71 cabins without permission, now profits from illegal development." The article went mildly viral in property rights circles and HOA reform communities. I got emails from people around the country sharing their own HOA horror stories, none quite as dramatic as mine, but all sharing a common theme of overreach and abuse of power. A state legislator even contacted me about testifying before a committee reviewing Montana's HOA laws. I declined, preferring to stay out of politics, but I appreciated that my experience might lead to better protections for other property owners. By the start of the third year, the cabin business was humming along so smoothly that I barely had to think about it. Sandra handled everything, sending me monthly reports and depositing profits into my accounts like clockwork. I'd essentially become a passive owner of a multi-million-dollar vacation rental operation, all on property I'd bought specifically to get away from people and businesses. The wilderness I'd originally sought was still there, just in a different form. The southern half of my property remained untouched forest and meadows where I could hike and hunt and enjoy solitude. The northern half had become something else entirely, a thriving little village that brought joy to thousands of visitors each year while funding my lifestyle. I never saw Patricia again after her sentencing. I heard through local gossip that she'd been sent to a federal facility in Colorado, and that her ex-husband had moved to Idaho with their 2 adult children who wanted nothing to do with their mother. The house was sold at auction, with proceeds going toward her restitution obligations. She'd be paying off her debts for the rest of her life. Sometimes I felt a twinge of sympathy for her, but then I'd remember how she'd smiled while explaining that she was taking over my property, how she'd threatened me with liens and foreclosure, how she'd stolen from hundreds of people who trusted her. The sympathy never lasted long. 3 years and 2 months after Patricia first rolled up my driveway with her convoy of trucks, I stood in the exact same spot by my living room window, looking out at my property. Snow was falling softly, coating the cabins in white. Smoke rose from 70 chimneys where vacationers were warm and comfortable, probably drinking hot chocolate and planning tomorrow's ski trip. My phone buzzed with a notification from Sandra. The booking system was showing record advance reservations for next winter, already 90% capacity. Revenue projections were exceeding $2 million for the year. I thought about my life before all this started. I'd been content, sure, comfortable, enjoying my isolation and my independence. But I'd also been slightly aimless, a retired tech guy with too much money and not enough purpose. Now I had both. The cabins had given me something I didn't know I needed, a connection to the constant flow of people without sacrificing my privacy. I watched families create memories on my land. I saw couples get engaged on the cabin porches. I heard about kids experiencing snow for the first time, playing in the drifts between the buildings. And I was getting paid extremely well for it. Money that I never would have made if Patricia Fairmont hadn't made the spectacular mistake of building on my property without securing proper ownership agreements. The lawsuit threats she'd made in those early days had been empty. The power she'd claimed to have was illusory, built on paperwork that couldn't survive legal scrutiny. And in the end, Her arrogance and criminal behavior had cost her everything while giving me more than I'd ever expected. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down at my computer to answer some emails. One was from a property rights organization asking permission to use my case in their educational materials. Another was from a documentary filmmaker wanting to tell my story. A third was from someone in Wisconsin facing similar HOA problems, asking for advice. I answered them all thoughtfully, sharing what I'd learned. Fight for your property rights. Document everything. Get a good lawyer. Don't let anyone bully you into accepting something that's legally wrong just because they claim to have authority. And sometimes, if you're patient and strategic, the people trying to take advantage of you will end up giving you exactly what you didn't know you wanted. The snow continued falling outside, and somewhere in those 71 cabins, people were laughing and making memories on land that was solely, completely, and irrevocably mine. The HOA that tried to take it was gone. Their president was in prison. And I was collecting every single dollar their illegal construction project generated. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast to justice, property rights, and the spectacular consequences of arrogance. Then I got back to work, because running a successful vacation rental business actually took more effort than I'd initially anticipated, even with Sandra handling the day-to-day operations. Life had a funny way of working out sometimes. Not always fairly and rarely predictably, but occasionally, magnificently in your favor. This was one of those times, and I intended to enjoy every minute of it while protecting every inch of my 400 acres from anyone who ever thought about pulling something similar again. The story ended exactly where it began, with me at my window, watching my property, only now with 71 heated cabins generating millions of dollars in annual revenue instead of empty wilderness. Patricia Fairmont had tried to steal from me and ended up building my fortune instead. And that, I thought, sipping my coffee as the snow fell and the money rolled in, was exactly what she deserved.